Hello, 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 it is I, Ihlamur, and I am here with you for what is probably the most anticipated focus on video of Pioneers of Pagonia so far. This is the focus on the farmer, and I've been doing a lot of work testing all the different fields, all the different crops, all the different terrains, and this is very much a foundational video. You know, there's going to be a lot actually that we get into. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you, but this is just the beginning, because these are the basis of so much of the game. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to show you a little bit about the farmer's schedule, or the three farmers in fact. We're going to look at the different crops and the different fields and all the different combinations and how those work with the probability of success, how many rot, the time that it takes for everything to grow. We're going to look at, beyond that, the nutrition values, comfort values of the various food types, and not flax, because that's not a food, but then really look at what it might be best. I'll show you the math behind it, because you shouldn't trust me. You shouldn't trust what I'm going to tell you. You should make sure that I'm being honest. So I will show you the math as well, and then we'll focus, as we normally do, on the building and the types and all of that stuff. But there's so much here. For some of you, you're just wondering about the very basics. You're wondering, what should I grow? And so I've put together this cheat sheet for you. Let's look at it together, starting with the pumpkins. Pumpkins are the most versatile. They are best grown on grass, fertile or sandy ground, which makes them good for the beginning of game when you might not have access to all the terrains. It takes about 474 seconds, which is about 8 minutes, for a pumpkin to grow from being seeded to being harvested or harvest ready. Once you do harvest it, it's got a nutrition score, so you can use it for your farmers and your quarry workers. Nutrition score of 3, which is about average, and a comfort score, so you can use it in your taverns for raising your population of 3, again about average. You can't use it for rations, but that's fine because it's already got a nutrition score. The outputs, assuming you're growing this on the best terrain, that's grass, fertile or sandy, is your optimal number of fields is 18. That's how many fields one farm of your crop farmers can handle without things going rotten. And actually, as they're kind of getting into the groove, 1 or 2 might go rotten at the beginning, but after that you'll find that nothing goes rotten. They have enough time to water everything. So 18 fields, as long as you keep those fields very close to the farm. And if you have those 18 fields running at full pelt, then your yield of pumpkins per hour will be 516, which is a lot of pumpkins. And if we multiply that by 3, we get 1,549 nutrition points per hour from your pumpkin fields. And similarly, same math for your comfort, for raising your population. So pumpkin, very versatile and reasonable scores. Now cabbage can really only be grown in mossy. Just to say that all the stats and the outputs are assuming that you're growing these on the best terrain, and I'll show you how that gets worse as you use different terrains later. But if you grow your cabbages on mossy, the growth time is really long. It's over 12 minutes, 733 seconds. But it does give you a good nutrition score of 4. Also, your farmers can keep up with a lot more fields because they've got more waiting time as the cabbages grow. So you can have 22 fields without cabbages rotting because they're not being harvested in time. And that means that the yield per hour is actually quite close. It's 452 cabbages per hour, as long as you've put your fields in the right place and you've got it on the right terrain. And because the nutrition score is 4, is higher, actually nutrition per hour therefore is higher than the pumpkins. So cabbages are better crops, even though they take longer to grow. It's just not as versatile, and you need a lot of space for the fields. So if you don't have a lot of space, not so good. Pretty good for later game. No comfort per hour. Nobody's going to want to make babies if all they're eating is cabbage. Or for wheat, now wheat's interesting because it's just the first step of the bread processing tree. Let's just deal with the terrain first. It's best on fertile, it's poor on grass and sandy, it's very poor on dusty and mossy. So you really have to grow this in a fertile place, which means you can only really grow it if you've got the right terrain available. Now the stats are as bread, so it has to get ground in a windmill and then it has to be baked at a baker's. But just for wheat itself to grow, the growth time 472 seconds, so again right around 8 minutes. The nutrition score is 6 once it's bred, but you have to factor in all those other pieces. And I'm not going to do that because there's a focus on the farm. I'm not going to do that in this video. But once we get to those other buildings, we will factor this in and figure out exactly how good bread is. Bread can also make 2 rations, and that's because the nutrition score of 6, if it gets taken to a provisioner, the provisioner breaks that down into how many meals that would have been and then makes the appropriate number of rations. So 2 rations. The outputs, again, the number of fields, you could go with 17 fields of wheat without it going rotting. Yield per hour is a bit lower, 427 sheaves of wheat per hour. But because the nutrition score is 6, it's a huge nutrition score per hour, 2,563. You can't use this bread for comfort. Again, that huge nutrition score offset by the fact that you have to process the wheat more, and we'll come to that later. Corn is the fastest growing crop. You need to grow it on sandy grass or fertile. Fertile's okay. The growth time takes 303 seconds no matter what the terrain. None of the growth times matter on the terrain. They're the same no matter what the terrain. It's the probability of success that changes. And that's what those percentages are next to the best, good, poor, very poor. That's how often you will succeed with the success, and we'll look at that in a little bit. Now, there's no nutrition score for corn, but there is a comfort score of 4, so pretty good for cheap comfort food. And because it's so fast growing, your farmers can only really take care of 11 fields at a time, but that still gives you a really good yield, 523 sheaves of kernels of corn? I don't know. Corn per hour, and because you've got that great comfort score of 4, it's over 2091 comfort per hour. So corn's actually really good if you've got some sandy ground and you want to raise your population and you don't have too much room. And finally, flax. Flax isn't a food, so it kind of sits by itself, but because it's still farmed, you have to raise it on really dusty ground, which is where you get the best yield, or sandy ground. Growth time is again right around 8 minutes, 472 seconds. There's no nutrition, comfort score or rations, but your yield per hour, if you've got 17 fields, which is how many your farmers can handle, is 427 pieces of flax per hour. Now there is another way of looking at this, and that's of course by terrain type. And so here this cheat sheet will show you what's the best crop to grow by terrain type. The growth times in the top right there do not change depending on the terrain. They're the same no matter what terrain, but your chances of success are there along the right hand side for each type of terrain: best, good, poor and very poor. And you can see that if you're, for example, growing cabbages, it might take 12 minutes and 12 seconds for cabbages to grow, but if you're growing it on sandy grass, you've only got a 25% chance of it growing, so it could be 4 times that long before you get a cabbage. That's why it's so important to choose the right terrain type. And in my math, what I've looked at is actually the best. Obviously it's 100%, you're going to get what you get, and you want to use the best terrain type if you can. Good is okay, and you're still going to be alright with the corn and cabbage there for your comfort and nutrition scores, because they've got better scores than the pumpkin, but don't bother growing your crops on poor or very poor ground. It's not the best use of your time. Now, as you know, there are 2 types of farms, a vegetable farmer and a crop farmer, and right now we're looking at the vegetable farmer. They do very similar things. When there's an empty field, they will go out and they will sow the field, and you see that animation there, and that's a 4-second task which takes place after the journey time. Now, once the crop gets to about 20% growth, the farmer will come along and grab a bucket of water, as long as one's available. That's why we always have a well available, and she'll walk and she'll water the plants, and there she goes, watering twice. And what I always wonder is, where do the buckets go? Because they just disappear into thin air. So there must be a stock of buckets somewhere around. Then the final thing is, once the crops are grown, they'll come and harvest them, and they'll harvest however many are ripe. Some of them, if they're rotten, will just be left to rot away into the ground. And what's interesting here is that there's always 4 crops and only 3 farmers, and so one will always have to come back unless you've got multiple vegetable farms. So yeah, that can slow you down a little bit. The other thing that's interesting, this is how it works for vegetable farms, for the pumpkins and cabbages. For wheat, flax and corn, which are crops, the farmer also has to harvest and cut down those crops. So there's an extra step. Planting takes about 4 seconds, watering takes about 5 seconds, harvesting and then gathering, which is what we're seeing here, takes about 6 seconds. And that's why the farmers can handle different numbers of fields, because they've actually got jobs going on. And so however many fields you've got, they're having to do those jobs at different times. Cabbages, which have a long growth time, give them time to do more jobs, so you can have more fields. Whereas corn, which is the fastest growing, there's less time between sowing and harvest, and so you can handle less fields. Interesting enough, the wells tend to be pretty close to the number of fields that you need. So 1 well per farm is about the right ratio. You might have some extra water, but that is not a problem. And here you can see the optimal layout for a cabbage farm to get 22 fields as close as possible to the exit of the farm. The farm's a 3x3 plot, fields are 1x1, and so you're just trying to get them as short a walking distance as possible from the exit there. Because it's not actually the work time in the fields that kills you, it's the travel time that means that you can't have more fields. Now look, you can trust me or not, but I did observe hours of footage here and hours of gameplay to figure out exactly how successful each terrain type was, to figure out how long everything took to grow, and do all the math behind it all. And I'll show it to you right here because you deserve to know. So I did watch every field on every different terrain type at least 20 times, and in fact in the case of the vegetables way more than 20 times. And so these numbers, if you were going to do a margin of error, it would be quite large, but I'm pretty confident if it's on the best terrain type, it doesn't matter what crop you're growing, you're going to get 100% harvest every time. If it's on the good type, then you're going to get about a 66% or 2/3 success rate, and that looks different for vegetables and for crops. For vegetables, it means that each one of your vegetables in the crop, well, all 4 of them, have a 66% chance of growth. So it's likely really that between 2 and 3 of your crops will grow and 1 or 2 won't, and it changes each time, but that's fine on the good type. For your flax, corn and wheat, the whole field either is successful or rots, and so about 66% of the time they will successfully grow and you'll get a harvest, but about 1/3 of the time that whole field will rot. So it works out about the same. On poor ground, it's wider variations, but it's averaging out to around 50% success rate. And then on very poor, about 25% of your crops will succeed, about 3/4 will fail. And what that means when we do the math, and I'll show you for, let's take an example, let's take pumpkins growing on mossy soil, which has a poor success rate, right? So pumpkins take about 8 minutes, 474 seconds to grow, and that's for the field. Now, on mossy ground, they've got a 50% success rate. That means that 2 of your pumpkins, on average, will fail out of the 4 crops that you've got per field. So you're going to get 1 pumpkin on average every 237 seconds, roughly every 4 minutes. Now, if we put 4 minutes into an hour, you get about 15 pumpkins per hour. That's if you've got 1 field and 1 farm. However, your 15 pumpkins, you've got 17 fields, so multiply that by 17 and you get an output of about 258 pumpkins per hour per an optimally set up farm on mossy ground. And those 258 pumpkins, each one of them has a nutrition score of 3, so you get a nutrition score of 778 nutrition per hour. Now, when I get to the marketplace and the tavern, each one of those pumpkins makes 3 meals, 3 side meals, so actually the nutrition score goes up. But we're going to treat it as a basic nutrition score of 778 nutrition per hour. If that was on the fertile ground or the grassy land, where it's the best success rate, well, then you're going to get double that. Obviously, you're going to get 30 pumpkins per hour, and you'll be more than 1,500 nutrition per hour. But that's how the math works. And I ran that math for everything and then was able to give scores because I ran it on every crop, on every terrain type. And the scores come out like this. So the green is the nutrition score, the orange is the comfort score, and the grey is the number of rations that you would get out of it, and you only get that for wheat, and that's wheat obviously after it's been turned into bread. And so you can see that wheat is by far the best with nutrition, with the caveat that it has to be made into bread. Cabbage is actually the best comfort, pumpkin the most versatile, and cabbage the second best nutrition, corn the best comfort food for your pioneers. Now all of these get made into side dishes. Main meals are reserved for meat, so you can make much better meals, but if you want to optimize your side meal, these are the crops that you want to do. And as you can see, it's much better to do them on the best or the good ground to get the best scores. Now, for those of you who really love the details, here they are. There's a couple of differences between the vegetable farmer and the crop farmer. They both take the same input, water from the well worker. The vegetable farmer has cabbages and pumpkins, which both go out to the market stall, eventually to be used by the tavern to create nutritious meals, and in fact comfort meals, and they're both side dishes. They take 3 workers who we'll call Phillipa the farmer, and they have a range of about 40 meters. The farm plots have to be within that range, and that's about 15 plots away. If you put the plots side by side, they can go about 15 plots. Their production time, excluding travel, sowing is 4 seconds, watering is 5 seconds, and gathering in that harvest 6 seconds, and they have to do that 4 times, 1 for each of the crop, as long as all the crops grew. They can store 16 cabbages and 16 pumpkins at the farm before stopping work. The farm's quite large. It sits on a 3x3 footprint, which is about 30 square meters, and the vegetable farmer takes about 3 minutes to build with 4 builders, which is how many it took mine. This building requires 10 softwood trunk and 10 stone, so low-level materials. And of course, the recommended number of fields: 18 if you're only growing pumpkins, 22 if you're growing cabbages. And there are 2 ways to set that. One is at the farm, telling them what to sow, just pumpkins or just cabbages or both. And the second way is at the field level, controlling what will be grown at the field, and you can set that to one of these types, and only that will be sown there. So if you have, for example, fields which only have pumpkins ready to grow and the farm is only going to sow cabbages, they won't do any work. The farm can be built on most terrain types apart from the ones that you would imagine: swamp, scree, cliff plateau and mountain. But interesting enough, can be built on any of the grass types, including and as well the steppe and the stony desert. Now, the difference with the crop farmer, of course, is in the outputs. The flax is going to go to the weaver, the wheat is going to go to the windmill, and it's just the corn that goes to the market stall. There's 3 workers again, but they have an extra step. One of them has to harvest the crop before it can be gathered in, so that's an additional 6 seconds. Of course, all of these things can be stored at the farm in their normal range of 16, and the range is the same to go to the different fields. However, building is a little bit different. It requires 5 builders, but they take a little bit less time to build it, 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And these require 10 softwood beams and 10 cut stones, so it's a little bit more of an advanced building. The recommended number of fields: 11 for those fast-growing corn, 17 for wheat, and 17 for flax. And that, my friends, is everything that I can think to tell you about the farms and the fields. I hope you've joined me all the way through do this. There's so much information. The game is very complex, has lots of different variables, and now using this as a foundation, we're going to work through the production chain to see which one of these really is the most useful at the different stages of the game. Hope you have a lovely day. I certainly have, and I've enjoyed it. Enjoy playing Pioneers of Pagonia, and I'll see you in the next Focus On video.